The HOA president thought she had finally found a way to force the fire station to follow her demands when she marched over to a utility access point and ordered a water valve to be shut off. But what she didn't realize was that within minutes, firefighters would discover what happened, and the person she was trying to outsmart happened to know the entire distribution system better than anyone else. The area what followed turned a petty HOA dispute into a situation that had emergency crews racing against the clock while shocked neighbors watched everything unfold. It started on a warm afternoon when I was conducting routine inspections on the municipal water network that supplied several neighborhoods, including a small fire station located near an HOA community. The station had been there for decades and operated without issue, but the HOA president Karen had been complaining about it for months. THEC claimed the fire trucks were too noisy. The training exercises were disruptive, and the station somehow reduced property values. Every complaint she filed was rejected because emergency services were considered essential infrastructure. But Karen refused to let the issue go people in the end. Neighborhood had grown used to her arguments, and most assumed she would eventually move on to something else. That morning, Karen arrived at a community meeting carrying a thick folder and spent nearly an hour demanding action against the fire station when officials once again explained that the station wasn't going anywhere. She stormed out, visibly angry. Several residents later said she looked determined to do something drastic, and judging by what happened next, they were right. Less than an hour later, a maintenance worker noticed someone near a secured utility enclosure adjacent to the neighborhood, but didn't think much of it at the time. Nobody suspected that a decision made in those few minutes would soon create a serious problem. Meanwhile, firefighters at the station were preparing equipment checks when pressure alarms suddenly began activating water flow. Readings dropped unexpectedly, and several systems started reporting abnormal conditions. At first, they assumed it was a technical fault, but the numbers continued falling. One firefighter immediately contacted utility services, while another began checking backup systems. The station depended on a reliable water supply for train, equipment suppression systems, and emergency readiness, and nobody could understand why pressure was disappearing so quickly. I was reviewing network data when the alert reached my screen. The readings didn't look random, they pointed to a manual interruption somewhere along the supply route. I began tracing the pressure changes through the distribution map and quickly noticed something unusual. One specific valve location had experienced a sudden change just minutes earlier. The more I looked, the more obvious it became that someone had intentionally interfered with the system. Then, another message came through, and this one changed everything. A witness had reported seeing Karen near the exact location shortly before the pressure loss began. Within moments, utility crews and fire department personnel were moving toward the site. Neighbors gathered outside as vehicles arrived, and people started asking questions. Karen was nowhere to be seen, but evidence at the location suggested the valve had indeed been tampered with. The problem was that restoring normal service through the standard process could take time, and every minute mattered if emergency resources were being affected. Several firefighters exchanged worried looks, while residents watched from a distance, unsure how serious the situation really was. Then I looked at the distribution map one more time and noticed something most people would never have recognized. There was an alternative route connected to the main distribution line that could potentially restore service if activated correctly. It wasn't commonly used. Very few people even knew it existed, but if my calculations were right, there was a way to bypass the interruption entirely and bring water flow back much faster than anyone expected. As emergency crews surrounded the valve site and questions about Karen's involvement started spreading through the neighborhood, I headed toward the control point, knowing that the next few minutes could determine whether the fire station remained affected or returned to full operation. And what happened when the bypass was activated left everyone standing there, completely stunned. I arrived at the control point with several utility technicians and fire department personnel following close behind. Everyone understood the urgency, because no one wanted a fire station operating with reduced water service even for a short period of time. The atmosphere was tense. Neighbors had gathered near the perimeter, trying to understand what was happening, while firefighters remained in constant NT communication with their station. As I reviewed the distribution map one final time, I explained that there was an alternate supply route connected to the main distribution network. It had been designed years earlier as an emergency contingency, but was rarely used because normal operations never required it. Most residents had no idea it even existed. The challenge was activating it correctly if the sequence was performed improperly. It could create pressure imbalances across the surrounding network. Every step had to be precise. Utility crews quickly moved into position. Valves were checked, pressure monitors were observed, communication lines were opened. Then we began the bypass procedure for a few moments. Nothing happened ever. Yon watched the gauges. Firefighters waited silently. The readings started moving slowly at first. Then faster pressure levels climbed, flow rates. Increased system indicators began returning to normal. Firefighter monitoring the station radio suddenly smiled and gave a thumbs up. Water service was returning. Less than 2 minutes after the final adjustment, the fire station reported stable pressure throughout its systems. The crowd that had gathered nearby broke into applause. Several firefighters, visibly relaxed. What could have become a prolonged operational problem had been resolved far faster than anyone expected. But while the emergency was ending, another problem was just beginning. Investigators were now focused on how the interruption happened in the first place. The secured valve location showed signs of unauthorized access. Witness statements continued coming in. Several residents reported seeing Karen near the enclosure shortly before the incident. Others described her angry behavior. Following the community meeting earlier that day, security footage from nearby properties was also being collected. As more information surfaced, the timeline became increasingly difficult to ignore. Investigators discovered that Karen had spent weeks complaining about the fire station emails, meeting records, community messages. Everything documented her frustration. Many residents had dismissed the complaints as harmless venting. Now those complaints were receiving much closer attention. The fire chief arrived later that afternoon and personally thanked everyone involved in restoring service. He also made something very clear: emergency infrastructure exists to protect everyone regardless of persona, opinions, regardless of neighborhood disputes, regardless of property values. The station's mission was public safety. Many residents applauded his remarks. For years, they had watched firefighters respond to accidents, emergencies, and medical calls throughout the area. The idea that someone would interfere with essential services shocked the community. Over the following days, investigators continued reviewing evidence. Interviews were conducted, access records were examined, video footage was analyzed. Very new piece of information seemed to strengthen the same conclusion. The interruption was not the result of equipment failure. It was not an accident. It appeared to be a deliberate act. As word spread through the neighborhood, residents became increasingly frustrated. Community meetings that once wanted set on landscaping rules and parking complaints now centered on accountability. People wanted answers. Many homeowners openly questioned how HOA leadership had reached this point. Some board members attempted to distance themselves from the controversy. Others admitted they had no knowledge of what had happened. The pressure continued building. Then came the announcement everyone had been waiting for. Officials confirmed that the investigation had identified the source of the unauthorized interference. The findings created shock throughout the community. Residents who had defended Karen suddenly became quiet. Those who had warned about her behavior felt vindicated. The story quickly spread beyond the neighborhood. People were stunned that a dispute over a fire station had escalated into something affecting critical infrastructure. Meanwhile, the fire station returned completely to normal operations. Training resumed, equipment checks continued, emergency readiness remained intact, and thanks to the bypass activation, the interruption had been limited to a very short period of time. One evening, several weeks later, I drove past the station and saw firefighters conducting routine drills. Everything looked normal again. Residents waved as they passed. Children watched the trucks with excitement. Neighborhood felt peaceful. Looking back on the incident, one thing stood out more than anything else. A single reckless decision had created a problem for an entire community, but preparation, teamwork, and experience solved it before serious consequences could occur. Karen believed shutting off a valve would give her leverage. Instead, it exposed how important the fire station truly was to everyone around. D. Her and the hidden bypass. She never knew existed became the reason her plan failed, almost. Immediately in the end, the lesson was simple. Essential services are not bargaining chips. Public safety is not a neighborhood dispute. And when a community works together, even the most unexpected probable Ms. can be overcome. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. We upload new stories every day, and your support helps the channel grow. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story.